people. Newbie here again. Well, I'm pretty baffled, to tell you the truth. You know, I got this layout that I purchased from AKA Joe, and I'll tell you, I just can't figure out how to easily incorporate large portions of the layout into my design just as they are. I'm at a loss. It's really become difficult to figure out, because basically the layout that he did was just a flat figure eight, a lot of buildings, town area and all that, a lot of scenery, but it doesn't fit well into my layout. I've tried. I've looked at taking one whole section, like the section where it has there by the train station that he had, where it's actually 4 tracks, a double track main line, and then 2 sidings, one siding for the station and one siding that basically goes off under the coaling station and around to the other loop. I was thinking that maybe I could incorporate that as my train station area, but it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. Number one, that siding that is in front of the train station is just too short. And so for me to do that, I could use that entire section and I could make that work. But then if I have to take that siding out, then I lose all that landscaping area around the train station and all that, and I just can't make it work. And the downtown area. Looking at the downtown area, it's basically inside of the loop. Well, the problem with that is that the loop that I have is much smaller diameter. And I've tried to figure out how I can take a portion of the town and just basically take it off of that layout and put it onto mine. But because of the proportions in terms of how big that circle is, it doesn't work. So I'll continue to play with that, but it's turning out to be much more of a problem than I initially thought it would be, and it remains to be seen how that's going to work out. So what's going on right now is you see this picture here. I've laid out foam on the layout, and I'm getting ready to start construction, if you will, of the new layout. And I got all the foam laid out, and then as you see in this picture here, I transferred basically some drawing, some track designs. I started laying out the yard. I actually started laying out the yard before when it was just the plywood, but since I put the foam on, I can now draw it out in a more realistic manner to see where the yard area is actually going to be, and I'm realizing that yard is going to be a lot smaller than I had initially hoped in terms of the number of freight cars and what I can put in there. But that's kind of immaterial. That's the only space I've got, and that's all of the space I've got. If I extend the yard any further out toward the town area, then I run into problems making the loops around the town, and also that internal loop that I want to have that will actually give me a second running loop. It'll be basically a squashed egg type of thing, of kind of a figure eight, that will actually be an internal loop that I can run trains around while I'm running trains on the main line. And So, and then if I stretch the yard any farther to the east, I don't have room for the engine house and the loop around the engine house. So I'm pretty much, it's pretty much fixed that the yard area is what it is. And so anyway, in the picture you see, I've laid out, I've got a couple of buildings laying there, or sitting there, laying out where the sidings will be to rail serve some of those industries. Then the next thing I started, I obtained a high trestle, and I started building that. It's still not completely finalized, but you see here, basic idea of how the trestle is going to sit. One of the things I've got to do is I've got to determine the height of the trestle relevant to the height of the track that's going to come out of the mountain right there. In this picture, you see how the track that goes into the tunnel by the coal mine and then loops around and then comes back out at the trestle. That's fixed in space. So the trestle has to sit there. And what I have to do is I have to cut what's actually going to end up being a lagoon area, if you will, that the trestle will sit down into. So the actual level of the lagoon will be lower than you see here as the tabletop level. So there'll be a lagoon. That trestle that you see sitting there will actually be lower at the base than it's shown here. And then the other part there, you see I've got another little curved bridge that will cross underneath the trestle with a track that will basically go back into a tunnel just after it passes under the trestle there. So that's where we are. I've done a little more work around the loop in the yard area. I experimented a little bit with spray foam, you see here, to fill some of the voids, and it works really well, but I'm not sure I'm going to go any further with that, because basically what you see here is that was basically a whole can of spray foam, pretty much. And to do that any more extensively, it gets pretty expensive in a hurry. So not sure how that's going to work out as to whether or not I'm going to use any more of that or not. Then the next thing I started doing, you see here, I've started laying some road bed, getting ready to lay track. And as I mentioned before, the loop that runs around from the yard area around through town and back to the other end of the yard ladder, and then loops around behind the engine house. This is basically the way that's going to look. Getting ready to lay some flex track in here. That's going to be flex track, and hopefully I'll get around to laying some track here in the next day or so. And the reason I'm doing that in particular, I want to do that particular section first, so I can run some trains on that layout. And so that's my plan, is to try to put together some track that I can energize temporarily, and I'm probably just going to energize it at DC for now. And I've got a couple locomotives that are DC only, and so I get that track installed and operational and plug it into DC and run some trains around that loop. So that's the plan as it stands right now. And like I say, how I incorporate the two layouts together is still kind of up in the air. So let's see what happens.